About 1 year and 1 month ago, the Detroit Pistons were the laughing stock of the NBA, losing a record-tying 28 straight games and finishing with the worst record out of all 30 teams for the second year in a row. Insult to injury came when the Pistons dropped from the first pick to the fifth pick in the NBA draft lottery, and coming into the 2025 season, Detroit was tied with 5 other teams for the worst odds to win the NBA championship at plus 50,000. Flash forward to today, and the Pistons are in the midst of one of the greatest single-season turnarounds in NBA history, sitting at the 6th seed, only 1 game behind the Bucks and Pacers for the 4th seed. You could absolutely credit the Pistons' new success to head coach JB Bickerstaff and the addition of floor-spacing vets. But what makes this even more impressive is that Jaden Ivey, the team's second option and former top 5 draft pick, hasn't played since the new year. This turnaround has to go deeper than the offseason additions. A team doesn't just jump from being irrelevant to becoming irresistible without the acquisition of a superstar. But somehow Detroit is doing it, and I want to dive deeper into why. But before we dive deeper into the why, I want to go over a little bit of the history of why Detroit's single-season turnaround is so impressive and so unprecedented in the history of the NBA. The Pistons would become the 4th team since the year 2000 to go from 20 wins or less to a playoff team in 1 year's time, with the other 3 being the 2003-2004 Denver Nuggets, who went from 17-65 to 43-39. Then you have the 2007-2008 Miami Heat, who went from 15-67 to 43-39. And lastly, the most recent team to do this is the 2014-2015 Milwaukee Bucks, who went from 15-67 to 41-41. And now this season, the Detroit Pistons have a chance to go from 14-68 to, according to ESPN's NBA Power Index, 46-36, which is a 32-win jump in just 1 season. And honestly, that's just ridiculous to think about. And the first thing that I believe has been the biggest catalyst in the Pistons' projected 32-win jump is, of course, Cade Cunningham. We all knew where Cade's ceiling was after he was drafted first overall in 2021. But with subpar spacing and the lack of a true offensive threat next to him in the starting lineup, it's been an up and down start to his career. But this season, Cade has thrived to a whole different level as a creator, not only for his teammates, but also himself. The first thing I want to point out about Cade's self-creation abilities is his ability to drive to the paint. At this current point in time, Cade Cunningham is 3rd in the NBA in drives per game at 17.2, and he shoots about 51% from the field on nearly 10 attempts per game on those drives to the rim, a higher percentage than guys who you would think would be better drivers to the rim, like Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, Anthony Edwards. Those guys are known as slashers, not necessarily Cade. And the reason why I think he's so efficient with these drives is because of his versatility. If you didn't know, Cade Cunningham is 2nd out of all guards in the NBA in shots at the rim, averaging 9.6 a game. And taking that away too, he's an efficient and high-volume mid-range scorer. When he drives to the paint, he's not just going to be looking for the layup. He's going to be looking to attack you in all different ways, get you off balance when you're going to the paint, hit a little sidestep mid-range. We saw it in the Celtics game last night. We've seen it throughout the season. Cade Cunningham is great at that. And then, of course, Cade Cunningham has become a serious threat from beyond the arc, shooting a little over 36% from above the break threes. Now, to show Cade Cunningham's versatility, I want to take a look at a couple of different shot charts. We're going to call the shot chart on the left player A, and the shot chart on the right player B. And as a note, the orange areas are where these players more frequently take shots. And as you can see, both players take a large portion of their shots from inside the restricted area and paint, and the large portion of their threes above the break. And I guess this makes sense, right? Considering that both are high-usage guards who drive to the rim frequently. The biggest outlier, though, is that player A shoots many more mid-ranges than player B. And though you can't see their percentages, player B is a slightly more efficient three-point shooter, but player A is deadly from the paint and the mid-range. If you haven't guessed it already by their shot tendencies, player A is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and player B is Cade Cunningham. Of course, you would rather take player A's shot chart over player B, but what I would want to highlight is the level of threat Cunningham is from around the court, and where he could potentially be when he is Shai's current age. Now pictured as SGA's shot chart from 3 years ago, or when he was Cade's current age, to Cunningham's shot chart today. There's a lot of similarities here, though Cade likes that baseline mid-range shot, and SGA hadn't found that bread and butter that we know him for just yet. What this tells me, and what should be assumed considering his age, is that Cade isn't done progressing. And while he clearly has his sweet spots on the floor, his versatility as a shot creator, which is still impressive today, isn't fully developed quite yet. And if he develops a third weapon in his arsenal, with the first two being his ability to drive to the paint and hit the above the break three, if he can add that third weapon as SGA did with the mid-range, Cade may become one of the best pure scorers in the league. And if you're the Pistons, you love to hear that, because even at his current form at just 23 years old, Cade is one of the top scorers in the NBA. And because of his scoring abilities, he's able to open the floor up for his teammates, which leads us into the second reason why the Pistons have turned it around, that being the veterans who have signed in the offseason. Last season, the Pistons recognized that their roster wasn't good enough, and they made so many roster moves in the middle of the season. So many that only 3 players were with the team the whole season other than Cunningham, who averaged more than 3 3-pointers a night, that being Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, and Marcus Sasser. And no offense to any of those guys, but you don't think of them as threats, or serious threats from beyond the arc. So the Pistons front office added Tim Hardaway Jr., a career 36% shooter on 6 attempts a game, Tobias Harris, a career 37% shooter on about 4 attempts a game, and Malik Beasley, a career 39% three-point shooter who averages 6 threes a night for his career. And while you may not regard some of those guys as three-point snipers, they make the defense respect the threat of the perimeter shot, which is opening up so much for this Pistons offense. And as a result, Cade Cunningham is quietly blossoming into one of the best playmakers in the NBA, and Malik Beasley is arguably the best three-point shooter in the NBA this season. And now, the same roster with no three-point threat now has 7 guys who take 3 threes a night. But that's not the only thing that these new vets bring. Last season, the Detroit Pistons had the 26th ranked defense in the NBA, allowing 119 points per game, allowing opponents to shoot 56% from 2 and 49% overall from the field. This season, the Pistons now have the 15th ranked defense, allowing opponents to score 113.3 points per game, allowing them to shoot 53.5% from 2 and 46.4% from the field overall. The Pistons front office did an incredible job this offseason in adding perimeter shooting and defense next to Cade Cunningham. And a special shout out to Asar Thompson, who was incredible against James Harden the other night, and a truly underrated piece solely because his brother is better than him on offense. And then of course, a shout out to Ron Holland, the 5th overall pick in this past draft, who's not receiving much national media attention because his offense isn't very polished. But his effort and willingness to compete on the floor every night makes me hopeful for his future on both sides of the ball. Of course, you'd like one of those guys to make a leap as a shooter in order to utilize both of their defensive efforts in the starting lineup. But as for now, letting these young guys find their stride is perfectly fine, as long as they're contributing something on a nightly basis and getting quality game reps in. And one of the best coaches in the NBA for that is JB Bickerstaff, which brings me to my next point, being that the coaching of these guys and the overall vibes of this team are significantly higher than last season. The mental aspect of basketball, I think, is a big thing that a lot of people disregard when talking about a player struggling or a player thriving. And I believe that part of the reason why this team is thriving is because their chemistry is top-notch. These guys look like they genuinely enjoy playing basketball with each other, and their relationship with JB Bickerstaff looks leagues above their relationship with the disaster hire Monty Williams. I believe that Bickerstaff's culture-building abilities have brought the Pistons to play good basketball for the first time in over half a decade. We've seen his coaching style with the Cavaliers, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of his coaching near the end of his tenure in Cleveland, he proved this season that his biggest strength is talent development, with a key focus point to build a culture and instill confidence in his players. All of these reasons could justify a leap for the Pistons, but it still doesn't explain jumping a projected 32 wins in just one season. Was the Pistons roster and coaching staff that bad last season? Was the roster surrounding Cade Cunningham and the other young stars really terrible to the point where they should have lost 28 games in a row? Maybe so. But to see this massive improvement in just one offseason goes to show you that surrounding your young pieces with quality vets and a coaching staff who cares really matters. Though I guess you could argue that this moment has really been 3 years in the making, and that one team every season is bound to make this type of leap. But even still, It feels as though the Pistons skipped that phase where they just finished short of the playoffs, and they've catapulted themselves into a guaranteed playoff series. If I'm the Cavaliers, Celtics, Knicks, or any team near the top of the East, I hope that the Pistons don't slide below the 6th seed, because they pose serious upset potential in the first round of the playoffs. Comment below what you think of this Pistons one-year turnaround and what you think of their playoff chances. And don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.